So bass guitars can definitely play melodies. This is a question that people often ask in Google and other search engines, and I find it, it's another one of those issues that it's kind of surprising that people ask it. But I guess if you're not a musician, you have questions about things like that that may seem silly to people who are more familiar with it. But of course, bass guitars can play melodies. It's a melody is really just a succession of notes. It's just a group of notes together in a musical phrase. It's just a line of notes that a person would memorize or remember as like a tune. It's a line, it's a tune, it's a vibe. It's something that you whistle. It's just it's not overly complicated. And a bass guitar can play a melody in the same way that a guitar can. The only difference is that a guitar is more commonly the creator of the melody, just because it's higher frequency based. And what I mean by that is that bass guitars are in the lower end of the frequency. Of course, that's why they call it bass. And lower end frequencies tend to be less. They stand out less. So as a result of that, they usually are not the creators of the melody, just because the frequencies don't stand out as much, so people don't hear it as much, and therefore it's awfully hard to remember something as a melody if you can barely even hear it. Like for a lot of people, in fact, even myself, like when I listen to bass like sometimes I'll listen to an album and I'll try and listen to the bass, and I can't even hear it. Like I can't even hear the bass in the album or in the song. And I think that's a tragedy, man. Like the way they mix the bass out of some of these albums, it's like such a tragedy. Like the way they did it in "And Justice for All" from Metallica. Like if you go on YouTube and you check out "And Justice for All" with bass and you listen to that, bro, it sounds so good with bass in it. Yeah, full album with bass. Like if you listen to that and then listen to the old one, it's like completely different, man. It's a different vibe. The record was so much better. But anyway, what are we talking about here? Can bass guitars play melodies? Yeah. I mean, a bass guitar can play the melody in the same way that a guitar can. A really good example of that is Juicy from the Notorious B.I.G. That's just one that stands out to me. Like there's many songs with great bass lines where it's kind of like the focal part of the song. This is a good example. Like this song, Juicy, has a sick bass line. There's many others too. What's that other one? I think it's a Jonas Brothers song, maybe, or Nick Jonas or whatever. There's a really dope bass line in it. I forget what it is. I wouldn't say it's like the melody though. It's just like the groove. Well, of course it's still a melody, but it's not the primary melody of the song. It's more like the groove. It's the rhythm. It's the vibe. It's the groove. But yeah, so I mean, a melody is just a term that describes a bunch of notes one after another in a musical phrase, just a bunch of notes. And a bass line is more specific. A bass line is like a line of notes that's played by the bass. So basically it's just a melody that's played by the bass. It's really not that much different from a melody. It's more specific. It's specific in terms of who's actually playing it. So a bass line is just a melody that's played by the bassist. I think that's the best way of describing it. Now, certain bass lines can be more melodic than others, and I think what's interesting is the differences between disjunct and conjunct motion. Conjunct motion, this sounds all like very scary and like, oh my god, like conjunct and disjunct motion. It sounds like so complicated and like so intimidating, but it's really not at all. Conjunct motion just means that you play notes that are close together in pitch. So like if you think of like C and D on the piano in the same octave range, like that's conjunct motion. Like if you went C, D, E on your keyboard and within the same octave, that would be conjunct motion. So I'll show you what I mean right now. Yeah, so like this is C, right? C, D, E. So if you play these notes together in succession, like you create a melody out of that. Oh, like D, E, C, E, C, D, C, E, C. Wouldn't be the best melody in the world. But regardless, that would be conjunct motion because it's all similar to, they're all close together. Like there's only like a step or a half step between each note. Well, disjunct motion is just like notes where the interval between the notes are much larger. So like from C to this C, and then like let's say C to this C, and then C to like G, and then F, and then up to like D again, that would be disjunct motion because the notes are further apart. So really, that's all it is. It's not too complicated. I think another thing that's worth mentioning is just like the role of the bass in music. I think one of the reasons why people ask if bass can play melody is just because, as I said before, it's a low-end frequency instrument, so it's generally not the instrument that plays the primary melody of the song. There's usually the singer who sings the primary melody, or the guitarist, or the piano, or some other person. But it's the bass is typically it's performing a different role in the music. It's usually kind of giving it more structure. It's providing a rhythm. It's kind of like solidifying the rhythm section along with the drums. It's usually played in conjunction with the kick. So every time the kick hits, the bass will also be kind of in there working with the drums. This is just kind of like a commonly stated thing in music. The truth is that like music is very diverse, and the bass can perform many different functions. Like it can work entirely separate from the drums. And I think a really good example of that, especially in this article, we talk about counterpoint, and I use the example of Ramble On from Led Zeppelin. Like if you check out their track right here, hopefully it doesn't play. I don't want to get copyright striked. But yeah, the bass line in the start of the song, it starts at like 10 seconds. And like that's a really good example of a really melodic, awesome bass line that it's very good. It works separately on its own. Like it's working totally separate from the guitar and totally separate from the drums. And it's just kind of like out there, and it just sounds awesome. I think John Paul Jones, I think his name was. He's probably one of the better bassists. I'm not like a big bass guy, but I am aware of some of these people, and for me personally, like when I listen to Led Zeppelin's music, I often think to myself like, oh, like that's a good bass line, And there's certain people where they have better bass lines than others. Another great example of that is Scale the Summit. They have a great bassist. I forget his name. I think he's like a Latino dude. I forget his name. Is it this dude? Oh no, it's this guy. Oh, isn't he? I don't think he's Latino. Never mind. Or maybe he is. I don't know. Mark Michelle or whatever. I guess that's his name. But yeah, this dude's awesome. His bass lines are sick, bro. And that bass is pretty dope too. Look at this bass, man. It's like the coolest bass I've ever seen. I want one like that. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, bass guitars can play melodies. It's undoubtedly so, but they're just less likely to play the melody because it's higher in frequency range. Anyway, that's all for this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.